think the important thing for is that it's true that Trump is not a unique phenomenon. It's very easy to look at the ways in which he's sort of gauche and bizarre. He's sort of, if some kind of communist propaganda ministry had come to a cartoonist and said, come up with some kind of stereotype of a bad American, they would have come up with something like Donald Trump, right? Somebody who's extremely rich, but also clearly doesn't really care much about other people, who is larger than life, who just brags all of the time. And so it's easy to think of Trump as something uniquely American, sort of very different from other parts of the world. But what's happening at the moment is that a new form of political regime is coming into its own, where we see the rise of what political scientists are calling illiberal Democrats, people who are very much based on majority opinion and on the preferences of ordinary people, but who want to sacrifice the rights of minorities that they dislike. And in that sense, Trump is just the American version of Marine Le Pen in France. He's the American version of people like the Alternative für Deutschland in Germany. And he's the American version of people like Viktor Orban in Hungary. And so I think, I can't speak directly to whether or not Nieto is also part of that. I don't know Maxim politics that well. But we have to see this as a threat that goes well beyond this election, that's going to stay with the American political system well beyond 2016, and that's really threatening to come home to Europe in a very real way.
First of all, before I go to Bruno Gollnisch and ask him about this, let me ask you, Celestine Bolen, about Trump's visit to Mexico. Are you surprised about the invitation? Are you surprised at how things went down?
I mean, I think it was not a bad move on Trump's part. I mean, I think it was a very bad move on the president of Mexico's part. He tried for half an hour, Trump, to look very statesmanlike. He read a script that was coherent. It was in full sentences. And he had he talked about we need to cooperate. I mean, things that everybody says when they're on foreign visits. I mean, where he comes back into his own is when he crosses back into the United States and lets it rip. And that's what his supporters want to hear. So, I mean, he scored a little point as a kind of statesman-like figure who can talk to other leaders. I mean, he's not yet a leader, but he can pretend to be in the running. And but then when it's back home and it's getting the votes and touching the buttons and playing into people's fears and going for a demagogic, frankly, pitch, he's back in his own element.
Bruno Gollnisch, if Donald Trump is elected president of the United States, is he going to build a wall and make the Mexicans pay for it?
I don't know. It's Mr. Trump. It will be to the American people to decide. But first of all, allow me to answer to what I heard. First, I think that the Mexican president was perfectly right when he decided to invite both main candidates to the presidency of the United States. It seems to me quite normal than Mexican authorities try to discuss, even if they do not agree with such candidate who could, at least one of them will be tomorrow the president of the United States of America, the most powerful nation in the world. And then, about the wall, I would say that as we at Front National, we do not intend to build any wall. We want to retain, to recover the possibility to decide freely who will come into our country, which is a problem of massive immigration. So you can say that the wall.
And does your party share the values of Donald Trump?
Well, we are consistent patriots, so we do not decide for others. If I were American, I would vote rather for Donald Trump than for Mrs. Clinton. But it is the American people to decide. And if Marine Le Pen becomes, as I do hope, president of France. She will have to discuss with the president of the United States, whoever it be. But let me say that we are much more than about this wall problem between United States and Mexico. We are much more interested in some attitudes in foreign policy advocated by Mr. Trump, who seem to us that they're much more respectful of the national sovereignty of foreign countries than the previous American administrations, either Democrats or Republicans. For example, Mr. Trump considers that NATO is obsolete. We do agree with this. We do not see the interest of NATO. He wants to have better relationship with Russia. I think he's right. And he's against globalism. In this point, he is right too, in our opinion. And he doesn't support complete free trade treaties that are absolutely devastating for developed nation economies, and we do agree with that.
Yascha Mounk, your reaction?
Yeah, may I just point out how absurd it is to say in one sentence that Mr. Trump and Ms. Le Pen both respect national sovereignty, and then in the next sentence to go on to say that we should be close to Russia, because that happens to be aligning the fact that the only time since the end of World War II that a country has invaded a sovereign nation in Europe is when Russia invaded and annexed part of Ukraine a couple of years ago. But it's very interesting that Ms. Le Pen and Mr. Trump see eye to eye on this, because they actually do want a politics that is based on a quite naked pursuit of national self-interest. This goes beyond a sort of sovereigntism. It goes to a populist expression of the whims and the preferences of your own people. And one of the fears I have is that we're talking a lot about this rapprochement between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin. And, you know, they have the same character. They're like two bros going into a bar for a night out together. But you know that those two are more likely to come to blows than any others. They may be similar in character, they may get along, but once they've had a couple of drinks, they're likely to clash. And I think that if Mr. Trump did become president of the United States, in the long run, you could quite easily imagine him and Mr. Putin coming to a quite needless and dangerous conflict. So this idea that we either should not be critical of Putin and not use very important institutions like NATO in order to guarantee the sovereignty of nations like the Ukraine, or even the idea that somehow Mr. Trump is going to be good for world peace because he kowtows to Putin rhetorically at the moment, I think both of that is quite naive.
Celestine